All right. We're going to go ahead and get started today. Good morning. And as I said earlier, we have a busy morning. I know there's a lot of things going on this morning, and plant sales and rally and a whole bunch of other things happening, and a marathon. So I know people are out because of that, but this will be recorded and it will be put on the website so people can watch later. But it's a good opportunity for us to ask questions and to get together. So we're here today. And just one other note, if you can please, if you're a delegate, put a D before your name. You can go ahead and rename yourself. Just go up to your photo or your name and go up to the right-hand corner. There's a little ellipsis. You can drag that down, and there's a rename section. And under that rename, you can put, you can change your name. So you can add what you want to, and whatever pronouns too, if you need that. So we have that on there also, or you can go down to the bottom to participants and find your name there, and you could change that also there. So, so I'd like to go ahead and start. And I think you all saw the agenda that was sent out and also on the webpage. But let me just ask if people saw the April minutes, and I'm just going to ask if I have approval for the April minutes.
I'll move to approve the April minutes. It's Judy here, Judy Baxter.
Thanks, Judy.
This is Drew Dutcher. I'll second that.
All right. Just go ahead and say aye if you can unmute yourself, and if you approve, or you can, why don't we just do the raise your hand under the reactions at the bottom of your screen. If you can, there's a place where you can either put a thumbs up or raise your hand to approve. So we'll go ahead and get approvals on that. Okay, it looks like I have 12. Any opposition? Go ahead and lower your hands. All right, any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, having none, that passes. So we'll approve the April minutes. One other thing we're voting for, now that you've gotten the hang of voting, we're voting today for approval of our new at-large position, Dave Halterman. Dave, I'm going to give you just a minute. I don't know if I told you that, but I'm going to give you a minute if you want to chat and kind of just say who you are, where you're from, kind of give us just a feel for you.
Sure. I'm Dave Halterman. I live in Winston Downs, which is in East Denver, just south of the Lowry redevelopment. I've lived there for 30 years. In the past, I've been an officer with our RNO. Back in the 90s, I participated in the first Blueprint Denver, and back when they changed from statistical neighborhoods to RNOs, I participated in some of the initial public process for Denver moves and other zoning and mobility efforts. I was a mayoral appointee for the Lowry Redevelopment Committee for my neighborhood, for the Citizens Advisory Committee, as well as helping to review the guidelines for the Buckley Annex, the 180-acre development directly to the west of that some years later, and a couple of intersection improvement projects, including the Lowry Quebec Alameda intersection improvement some years ago. And I'm currently active with the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Committee. I have an interest in climate, transportation and infrastructure, and making positive changes in the modal shift for Denver mobility, among other things. So happy to help. Good to be here.
We're happy to have you join us. I don't know if anybody has any questions. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a vote, but I need a motion from the floor to approve this nomination.
This is Judy Baxter. I put forth a motion to approve David Halterman as our new at-large member of the Executive Committee.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Christine, you raised your hand. You have a
Sure, I'll
question?
second. I just got here.
Oh,
so
okay,
I'll
thank
second.
you. Okay, great. Good. All right. So those of you who are just joining us, and I know some of you might not have heard, so I'm just going to let you know that we have a new candidate for the board, for INC board, and it's David Halterman. We have a motion and a second hand, and he's raising his hand, or you could see him up there on the screen. And so I'm going to ask everyone again to go down to your reactions, and you can raise your hand or put a thumbs up. And if you approve David, and I think it's always commendable to any person who says, yes, I'm gonna be on a volunteer board, because it's a lot of work, but we certainly do appreciate it. So those of you who approve him and are INC members, please raise your hand for David. And right now I had 19 earlier, so I think a few people went down. So raise your hand again if your hand went away, if you approve. Okay, I have 17. All those 18? Any opposed? You can go ahead and lower your hands now. All right, so any opposed to the nomination? Go ahead and go down to reactions and raise your hand. No opposed. Any abstentions? Raise your hand. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, David, for joining us. I appreciate it. Just to let all know, we also now have another opening because Trupti Suthar, I think you all know Trupti. She's been working hard to do work on engagement. She's become very involved with her RNO and has some other things going on, and she's going to step down. So we do have another position if anyone is interested. So I would appreciate if anybody contact us. So again, thank you for volunteering, and thanks for all your work you've done with the city of Denver, and for all your work that we heard you explain earlier. I didn't know some of that, which is really wonderful. So thanks for that. Next up, we have Greg. I think you're a co-host. Go ahead and we'll have our INC treasurer update.
Good morning, everyone. Quick update. There has been very little change from last month. At the end of April, we had $2,100 in checking, $4.80 in petty cash, $12,968 in savings, and $26,014 in our community fund, for a total of $41,090, basically. Last month, we had $255 in new memberships for RNOs, plus a $25 associate membership. And then we had a charitable contribution of $40. So we had income of $320 last month. We paid Survey Monkey $288 for our annual license. And we had service fees of $4.46. And we had a return of $79 for prepaid storage. So our total office expenses in April were $253. And I'm sorry, total expenses, all categories, $545.46. So we spent more than we took in by $225. There was no activity in the community fund last month. And I would like to request people to volunteer for an audit committee and a budget committee. And generally, the chair of the budget committee is also the chair of the audit committee. And we would like to get someone to look at our 2021 financial records. So if you are interested, please send me an email or just put your name in the chat or send an email to treasurer@denverinc.org. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Greg. Thanks for that. Again, so if anybody wants to volunteer for that, we would really appreciate that volunteering for the budget or the audit committee. You can reach out to Greg via the chat. So thanks for that. We have other committee reports. Why don't I start with Christine? Do you want to start with ZAP?
Sure.
Or I think Ian's also on too. So
Yeah,
either one of you.
we do not have a finalized agenda for May. We're working on a couple of things, so I don't want to announce that. And then in last month, we had both a really good presentation from the city on a citywide project involving accessory dwelling units. In other words, it's not neighborhood by neighborhood or house by house. They're looking at what they can do citywide, hopefully taking into account different neighborhoods types. And it'd be worth everybody's time to go back and find that on the website and watch it. So we also had a discussion of metro districts. So that's all I have. Ian might have something.
Thanks, Christine. Can you all hear me? I wasn't able to attend in April, actually. I think if people know, I work for Green Latinos doing environmental justice work, and Earth Day is my birthday, so the 23rd was a really busy day for me. But I'm gonna grab the YouTube video. I was watching it yesterday, actually, for the Metro District's conversation. There was also some legislation at the State House that was related to it. So I will make sure to drop that in the link for you all. And I think, as always, feel free to send us any sort of issues that you believe we should cover at INC ZAP.
Okay, great. Gertie, do you have a question?
I just have something that I want to add to what Chris said about last month's ZAP meeting, and that is that they're not the purpose of that effort is to look at zone the ADUs, not imposing ADUs all over the city, but only looking at ways that ADUs to facilitate making it easier to build ADUs and make them fit in better to the various contexts in which they might be located. Isn't that accurate, Chris?
I'm not sure.
It is
Thank you for that.
citywide. It is citywide. I mean, they're looking at ADUs all over the city, but not saying that the purpose of the group is to make it easier to build ADUs, but they're not, at this point, they're not looking at map amendments. They're looking at amendments of the code.
I'm going to have to go back and look, but I thought that the goal of the program would result in legislative amendments. So you've raised a good question, and maybe Ian and I can go back and look at that more carefully. Thank you, Gertie.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Okay, next, I think I know there's some planning going on. Maggie, I don't know if you want to add anything about parks and kind of what's coming up, or if you want to hold off on that.
I'll hold off on that.
Okay, okay.
Thanks.
So go ahead. Okay, well, we'll look for that in the future. So look for the agenda for our upcoming meetings. Next, had a really engaging meeting Thursday night. Joel, do you want to go ahead?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. Joel Noble, Chair of the Transportation Committee. We had our every other month regularly scheduled meeting this Thursday, and we had 4 topics. The first is a Denver Deserves Sidewalks ballot initiative. I'm going to put a link in the chat to the webpage for that ballot initiative. This is essentially Denver Streets Partnership leading a ballot initiative to ask voters, should we have a fee per linear foot that we're charged, and in return transfer responsibility for sidewalks to the city? And they would have the funding and they would have the obligation for sidewalk installation and repair. This is something INC has been calling for since 2006 in written positions that we have, and it's part of the INC transportation platform that was approved by the delegation in 2015. And sort of point for point in what they're proposing, it reflects what we've been calling for. So this is pretty exciting. The video of the meeting will be up soon on INC's YouTube channel. And next month, we're going to come with a motion for the delegates that INC officially support this ballot initiative and encourage neighborhoods to support it. Of course, the motion coming from our committee, which was unanimous and was made by Michael Henry, was just 2 days ago. So there's not enough time to inform the delegates. So you as delegates will get plenty of time to review this prior to next month. But you can learn about the specific ballot initiative at that website, www.denversidewalks.com. Our second topic was an update on the RTD system-wide fare study and equity analysis. As we know, RTD's fares for riding the bus or riding the rail is among the highest in the entire nation. So they're looking at what are the trade-offs, how can they reduce that, should they have distance fares or not, what kind of discounts should there be, and overall, can they lower the price and what's the impact on service? One of the reasons they're able to really do this now in a way that they couldn't do before is up until last year, the legislature required that 30% of RTD's revenues come from fare box, or more technically come from non-tax revenues. So even though they might have a certain amount of tax from the RTD tax we all pay as part of sales tax to go fund the service, they couldn't use that unless they matched that with at least 30% from the fare box. So that's one of the factors that kept the prices high. There are, of course, many other factors, and there's challenges right now because ridership is lower during COVID and after COVID. But we had the Chris Quinn who presented gave just a really thoughtful overview of this. It wasn't kind of marketing speak of, just here's a program and please fill out our survey. He really gave some insight into what they're up to. The third topic, Tegan Rice from RTD is the senior rail planner. And so there were some questions that came to the committee about things like when events let out at major event locations next to rail stations, the rail isn't always running at 10:30 at night the way it used to. So people are kind of stuck and scrambling for how to leave the venue. And that opened up a conversation, not just about events, but about in general, rail planning, the trade-offs, the challenges, and what's next. And so just another example of meeting the person who actually does the work and having a nice conversation and insight back and forth. And then finally, our meeting was Thursday, which is one day after the end of the state legislative session. Pete Van Huven, Director of Government Relations from Bicycle Colorado, gave a really thorough overview of all the transportation and mobility topics and how they turned out at the state this year. So we've long talked about INC. We should be more aware of and involved with legislation, but of course INC doesn't necessarily have lobbyists and have that capacity. But taking the mobility organizations as a whole, as we communicate with each other and interact and share each other's priorities, acting like a coalition, there's a lot of people doing great work, and it's great to be plugged in with them. So I really encourage watching any of these sessions that interest you. When it's up on the YouTube channel, it has indexes, so you can click right to the topic that interests you. Thanks.
Thanks, Joel. And I found it pretty interesting, the access to trails or access to use under power lines, which was really rather interesting. Ian, did you have a question or comment? I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question about the sidewalk initiative. And then, you know, similar to the increased fees that they're talking about with pay as you throw at the city and having a sliding scale for people who are on fixed incomes and things, is there any sort of equity provision that's been written into it? I haven't encountered a petitioner yet to ask that question.
Yeah, that was something that was considered very closely. The trade-off, of course, being if you add a lot of complexity to the process, you add a lot of cost to the process if you have to sort of income validate on a person-by-person basis. So the kind of compromise they came to is, you know, easy to administer, and that is in nest neighborhoods, as Denver maintains that list over time, the fees will be 20% off. And so rather than having to validate person by person, since the city has already identified these neighborhoods where lower income is a concern, just on balance, we're going to have a 20% reduction in this proposal.
Thanks, Joel.
Any other, oh, there's a question about what is a nest neighborhood?
Yeah, Denver has an Office of Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization, and they maintain their focus neighborhoods where you know, the risk of displacement is high and incomes tend to be low. And so you can find out about that on Denver's website, looking for a nest or neighborhood equity stabilization.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? All righty, so I'm gonna go
Mike?
over.
Mike Henry has a question.
Oh, Mike, go ahead. Are you muted? Go ahead and unmute if you.
Well, I would just, regarding sidewalks, part of the discussion and the motion at the Transportation Committee meeting was to strongly encourage all delegates and all RNOs to participate in the signature gathering. It's a very difficult process, and the deadline for turning in signatures for the ballot issue is July 11th, which is only 2 months from now. And Jill Locantori is sort of the point person for telling people how they can pick up petitions or how they can go to locations to sign. So I really encourage everybody to get started on that now and not wait until next month's meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. I'm carrying a packet myself. You can find out the information Michael's talking about, how to get a packet to collect signatures, and of course the instructions that are very important for how to do that properly, as well as how to meet somebody at an event to sign at www.denversidewalks.com.
Great, thank you. So I think there's a lot of interesting topics to go over. Anything else before I move on? Okay, Jane, do you want to go ahead with Climate and Sustainability Committee. So let's go ahead and go there.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's always nice to see everybody on a Saturday morning, even if it's just to see your name on the black background. I want to invite everyone on May 26th, the fourth Thursday at 6:30 to our climate meeting. We're going to be talking about trees. And we have guest speakers from the park people. We have Lindsay Cutler, and from the CSU Extension Office, Merrill Kingsbury. And they're going to be talking about neighborhood trees, park trees, your own trees, how to help plant trees, and all of the issues that are coming up right now about when and how a tree should be taken down if it's necessary. So it'll be a good discussion. I invite all of you to attend, get your questions ready now. And hopefully we will also have a student report, which I'm going to introduce in just a moment. Our committee is growing. I invite all of you to join our committee. We meet on the fourth Thursday of the month at 6:30.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then you can always get the link on the INC website. And then Jane, go ahead. You can go to your next.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm really, really happy this morning to let you know that the recipients of one of our Youth Civic Engagement Awards this year are students from Denver Public Schools who've really made a significant motion to the Denver Public School Board. And I'm going to turn it over to Mariah and Molly right now. They were going to give us a presentation. We had a miscommunication. I'd like to invite them back another time to do a full presentation, but I want to give them about 4 or 5 minutes this morning. So take it away, Molly and Mariah.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having us. It's Mariah and then Molly, and we also have Gabe, and we're all part of DPS Students for Climate Action. And like Jane said, we received a grant from you all that has helped us with our efforts in passing sustainability policy through the DPS board. So as of April 21st, that policy has been adopted, which is a huge success. So we do have a presentation, but we can kind of just read to you what the policy says, just so you know. Oh, wait, I'm not seeing it, Gabe. Oh, yes, I see it.
Oh, the presentation or the?
Okay. Yeah, so we won't share our screen, but it says, DPS shall be a national leader in establishing an organizational culture anchored in sustainability, climate action, and environmental justice in both the conservation of natural resources and in minimizing the carbon footprint of DPS practices. So that is now a part of DPS documents. And Molly will talk a little bit about our sustainability club at East High School.
Yeah, so all three of us attend East High School, and we just recently had the pleasure of participating in the Tree Plenish event through our sustainability club, which we again really appreciate because we were able to plant more trees and distribute more trees to the community because of the money we received from you all. So thank you again for that. Within our sustainability club, we have many members who give presentations regarding different topics around climate action and sustainability and how we can make change and broaden our global perspective regarding it. So that's every single week interesting to learn about something new. And then in our recent Tree Plenish event, we were able to drive all over the city to either directly plant trees in people's backyards or to hand off trees for them to plant themselves in the future. Gabe and I drove up to Boulder where we planted about 20 trees in one backyard and then delivered another 20 trees to another. It was a full day excursion, but it was really fun too. So just goes to show that sustainability and climate action are fun as well.
Yeah. And I mean, we could not have done that without your support through your grants in both the policy and also the Tree Plenish event. We were able to get essentially an additional 100 trees to plant across the Boulder area and support these areas after the fire, as Molly mentioned, by driving down there with all of our club members. And we even actually got coverage by the national side of Chalkbeat, which is an educational organization, on how our group was doing sustainable work within the district. We also got mentioned on some local newspapers like the Broomfield Ledger and also on a TV interview. So we got a lot of recognition from it, and it was great to see all the support and stuff. You could definitely check out a few of the images and stuff of what we were doing on our Sustainability Club website, which I'll put in the chat, and then also on the policy. And I just want to piggyback off of what Mariah said about the importance of that policy, because ultimately, I don't know if you know it, but DPS has over 90,000 students and also nearly like 10,000 staff across the district working in different areas. So it does have a truly enormous impact. And we would not have been able to have the support or get the online resources like our website and the change.org petition without the grant that you provided us. And that petition, by the way, now has over 4,000 signatures. So it was definitely a lot of awesome stuff that went on. And I'll put all the links to those in the chat.
And
Well,
so,
Great,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
I just
Well,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
say,
Yeah, go
Amelia's
ahead.
here as well, a member of our team who's been very helpful. And I see that Ian's hand is up.
Yes, Ian, go ahead.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say congratulations to Mariah and everyone. I had a chance to work with the youth on this. It's super exciting. And they've taken the step to also participating in other things, like Mariah came down and did a press conference for electric school buses at the state level. So I just am really excited. I think this is the kind of work these grants can really empower and bring youth into the work that we're doing. So just really stoked for you all. And I also want to just let the membership know that like now it's really in the hands of working with the superintendent, and you know, these policies guide the superintendent's operational plan. And so there's a lot going on there, but I would just encourage you all, if you're interested in advancing this work beyond just the school board, it's now in Dr. Marrero's hands as well.
Thank you, Ian. Yes. And now, as a large portion of the work next year will be having this follow through of how do we actually enact these words into action. And so that will be through connections in communities and seeing how we can really make this happen. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. I love having you here, and I love having the opportunity to hear from you and to see where our grants go. And I think our membership loves to see that. And I like to see the young faces too. So that's a great thing. Jane, go ahead. I know you were talking, but you were muted.
I just am so proud of the students of Denver Public Schools for taking this issue on. You've done more than a lot of us have done, and I applaud all of you. So keep up the good work, come back next year for some more grants. And if there's any other ways that we can help you communicate with neighborhoods, please let us know. And we will get your presentation at another time. I'm sorry it was cut short this morning.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, we'd love to have you back. I think it's really important to hear from you. And I think it's nice to know that the future's in good hands. So thank you so much for your work. Keep it up. Thank you. All right. We're going to go on unless there's any other questions. We're going to go on. We have a presentation today from Denver City Auditor's Office. And I know a lot of people have had questions in the past about where money goes, how's the flow of money, you know, what's going on with city funds, especially like marijuana funds. So I think this is a good time to have this presentation and have some questions answered and to go and hear a bit about that and have that opportunity. So I'm going to hand that over. Sara, I'm going to hand that over to you.
Hi, thank you so much.
Hold on, Maggie, can you make sure they're co-host? Sara, you want to be co-host, right? So you can share the screen?
Yes, I would like to share
Okay.
the screen. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think I can do it now. So, well, I'm community engagement specialist for the auditor's office. And today I have with me Jeffrey Garcia, who is the director, the executive director from Denver Labor, that is a division of the auditor's office. And he explained you everything about what we do, what the auditor does, and what Denver Labor does. So that's for the community workers and employers here in Denver. So I'm going to share my screen and let pass the turn to Jeff.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody, for having us today. This is typically a presentation that Auditor O'Brien gives, and he absolutely loves to come to organizations like this. But he actually had some travel plans, so I'm kind of pinch hitting for him today. He and I have attended almost 400 neighborhood association meetings since he took office in 2015, which is a good feat in of itself. But if you consider COVID, I'm really impressed and proud of the work that we've done. A little bit different than what Tim normally gives is I want to let you know kind of the unique nature of the Denver Auditor's Office, our financial condition, a little bit about what's going on with Denver Labor, which is the labor enforcement side of the office, which is the side that I work on, and which I'm very proud of, and how to best connect with us. Because if you've had questions in the past, I want to let you know that you don't have to wait to a situation like this. You can contact us anytime. We answer every question that comes into our email or our voice messages. If there's a question or a concern about the city, we're definitely the office you should connect with. Let's move forward a little bit. So those are the 4 elected offices in the city. It's unique, and I like to point this out because there's probably only a handful of elected auditors at a municipal level across the United States, a couple dozen. And the auditor, like the mayor and city council and clerk and recorder, are elected every 4 years in Denver. And they're all in the same cycle. So when you're voting for the mayor, you're voting for the auditor, you're voting for city council. And our goal is to make sure that when you do elect an auditor, that you are getting the independent elected official that is unique to Denver, and you get that oversight that the voters want. Let's go forward. So we have 3 principal purposes. We do internal auditing. That is that we review every contract that the city enters into. We review the financial condition of the city by employing an outside CPA firm, as well as auditing all city programs and agencies. We do that internally, as well as hiring expertise outside the city. We enforce the city's minimum wage and prevailing wage laws, which is, again, a unique thing. There is no other elected auditor that has that duty across the United States. We are the only office that has an elected auditor that enforces the labor laws for a city. And then Tim also chairs the Independent Audit Committee. If you're ever up and interested in what we're doing on the 3rd Thursday of the week of the month, you can watch us on Channel 8 and watch whatever that month's audits are. Tim was elected in 2015. He was reelected and then opposed in 2019. And I think you might get a chance to vote for him again in 2023. Let's go forward.
To the Associated Press, Democrat Joe Biden.
Alexa, stop. Sorry. Alexa must have thought I was talking to her when I was talking to you. A little bit about the financial condition of the city. COVID was rough. I'll definitely show you some numbers that show that the city was definitely affected by COVID, but the city was fairly proactive. And if you look across the municipalities across the United States, you will see Denver fared as well, if not better, than every large city. We did things like hiring freezes, furloughs. Myself, Sara, Tim, we all had to take time off without pay. We used reserves, which I'll discuss in a lot more detail in a moment, and we held off on discretionary spending. So replacing fleet vehicles or equipment, or trying to make things stretch, making sure that the things that we already had invested in were maintained a little bit longer and were used to the maximum was something the city did, and we did it very well. Let's go forward. So someone mentioned marijuana a moment ago. People are always interested in it. It does produce a great deal of revenue for the city. And as you can see in 2020 and 2021, COVID did not stop anyone from using marijuana. In fact, marijuana sales and the revenue from it went up in both of the COVID years. You can see that it almost was $51 million in revenue that for the city that marijuana sales and its tax created. It's a significant amount of money. It's enough to probably build a fire station or two, but it's not enough to man a fire station or to keep things like that going. So it is typically an asset to the general fund, but not a large portion of it. It's not a large portion of our budget. So let's move forward. Unlike marijuana, sales and use tax is the principal portion of how the city gets its revenue. And you can see in 2020, and you'll see a similar number when those numbers come out in 2022, sales and use tax were down. People were not eating out. People were not buying things at stores. And it had an effect. I mean, the really great thing is that hopefully we didn't see a lot of city services affected by it. I know we worked very hard in the city to keep it from going that direction, but $100 million in less revenue is an impact on any organization. And if you think about that over 2 years, it's going to have an impact. I'll show you a little bit about how we address that as a city. Let's go forward. So looking a little bit about how that sales and use tax was affected, you can see food and beverages down almost 40%. Real estate and rentals were down almost 30%. We're a big tourism city. We see a lot of people come in. We get a lot of people visiting Denver because it's a beautiful place. I'm a Denver native. I love Denver. But 74% reduction in the use of hotels and accommodations is a big hit. People weren't shopping, right? People were buying food and staying home, right? So we did see a little bit of an increase in grocery stores and in non-retail stores and in some other types of taxes. Why don't we move forward one more? So the general fund, when you hear about the general fund, and you may hear about it in the paper, or you may hear Tim talk about it, or you'll hear me talk about it, it's our savings account. It's the city savings account. It's the money we had put aside in the event of a bad situation. And when the bad situation occurred, we used it. So we used about $80 million of it in 2020. We used a little bit of it in 2021. Those numbers will come out in June. But the nice thing is that we planned for it. We had thought about it. We knew that there was a possibility of problems in the future. And it doesn't have to be a pandemic. It can be, a natural disaster. It can be inflation. It can be a recession. But the city was prepared. And we used that 90 million. And now our goal is to get that back up to where it is. And we feel comfortable with being ready for the future. You'll see a small drop between 2017 and 2019. That has nothing to do with any kind of drop in our ability to generate revenue as a city, but more about funds being directed towards some bonds so that we get a better interest rate. I see a question. I actually can't see the chat, but let me pull it real quick. Oh, okay. So there's a question about the authority of the auditor and the right to audit counsel. Happy to do it. We went to City Council. City Council is an agency of the city. Like all agencies, we have the right to audit them. We had been asked by several City Council members to audit City Council to see if all City Council members were receiving funds and information and access to resources the same way. When we did our entrance conference with City Council, we found out that they didn't want us to do interviews of their staff without supervisors recording the interview or having someone take notes and report that back to a supervisor or to a council member, which is very, very unique. We've never had that with another agency. It's odd that a supervisor would want to know what their staff is saying during an audit. And really what it did was it froze the ability for people to speak freely to us. And that's really important. We want to make sure that the employees are able to do so. Is it a violation of the city charter? I do think that there are elements of the city charter that were not followed in that regard. Let me look here. I'm getting good questions.
One question, Jeff, is what kind of enforcement authority we have to the agencies that don't want to follow our recommendations?
Thanks, Sarah. And if questions come up, if you would ask them to me, Sarah, it's easier because it's difficult for me to see it because my screen is taken. So there is a portion of the charter that says we have the right to make sure that our recommendations are followed. In the event that someone doesn't want to be audited, we can go through the process with the city attorney to see if we can force them to be audited. But typically when people are forced to be audited, it doesn't become really a good product. We want to make sure that when we do an evaluation and we make recommendations, they're going to adopt those recommendations, and also that we're good at getting good information. So one of the best ways is to reach out to organizations like you, or for you to know what's going on in the city and tell your city council members, tell the city agency that you might work with, say, hey, we want you to be audited. We want to know that you're using Denver resources correctly, and we want the transparency that government promises. Are there any other questions, Sarah?
There are comments about the sidewalk. We have a sidewalk audit
Definitely.
that we did in 2020. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
It's actually on another slide in a moment. So I will answer the question
You
about
will.
sidewalks. Let me get to that slide and we can talk about it. So when we move forward, a lot of times, similar to marijuana, we get questions about DIA. DIA was definitely struck very, very hard by the pandemic. But as you can see, even in 2020, when I believe employment rates dropped by almost 40%, we were still able to run the airport in a very efficient way to still be able to receive funds greater than the cost of operating the airport. DIA got a lot of money from the FAA. So not only were we able to operate it in a positive manner, but we also saw a large increase in federal funding. And we're actually working right now to improve the airport. So the city's investing in quite a bit to have an additional runway and to continue to generate revenue for the airport and for our community through it. It is one of the largest, if not the largest employer for the city right now. Let's move forward. And was there a question, Sarah?
I'm reading, there are quite a bit of comments, but it doesn't seem, there's another comment asking about the subpoena power that it was removed. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that as well.
Yeah, so City Council did elect to remove the subpoena power from the auditor's office after they had granted to it to about a year prior. When it was granted to us at the last moment, an additional amendment to it was added. And our office feels that that amendment violates our duties under what's called GAGAS, the generally accepted government auditing standards. We asked them to correct that. Instead of correcting it, they've elected to remove the power from our office altogether. My understanding is that there is work being done right now by City Council to have that corrected and it restored, but I don't have much of an update from their side. That may be something you can ask your City Council members about for in the future. We do have an audit plan. Audit plan is what we're going to do the following year. The audit plan comes out the second Monday in October every year. We perform things like performance audits, making sure that city agencies are working correctly. We do financial audits, making sure that all of the ledgers are balancing correctly. Contract audits. One of the things I think is really important is that the city spends money in two ways. We spend money on payroll to our employees, but also we contract for things. So if the city wants to buy 100 pounds of nails, we want to make sure that when we buy that and we pay for it, we actually get what we're paying for. And that's a very important thing that our office does. Information technology, you've heard all about it, you've seen it. Cybersecurity is a major issue across the United States. The Department of Transportation in Colorado was hacked. The city of Atlanta was hacked. We're making sure that our IT services are top notch. And so far, we've done really great audits and we've seen that our security is holding up really well. Data analytics is something I think is really cool. Kronos was hacked. So Kronos was hacked and there was a Kronos isn't part of the city. Kronos is a vendor that we use to track our time. So like all of our employees, myself included, log in and tell Kronos when we are working, and then the payroll department uses that information. It's not something operated by the city at all, and it was hacked across anyone who uses it. So I believe organizations like Target and some departments of the city, of the state, use that software as well. But that software system as a whole was hacked, not the city specific use of it. So it's the same way as like Microsoft may have got hacked or Google or something like that. The city was in a fortunate position to be able to restore our records. And one of the great things is that our office actually had a great deal of that data. So we were able to help in that restoration. We also have regulatory audits. As far as regulatory audits go, the city, both city council and you as voters have asked us to audit specific programs. And we do that on a scheduled basis, and we make sure that all those audits that you're asking us to do through a statute is performed. Let's go for a little bit more.
Can I just ask you to put the link to the auditor's report on the sidewalk situation?
Absolutely.
If you could put that in the chat, that would be awesome. Thank you
And
very
in
much.
about 2 slides, I'll talk to you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, if you could just put that in there at that time, that'd be great.
Definitely.
I will add it.
So people often ask, how do we decide what to audit? We perform somewhere between 25 and 50 audits in a year, depending on the size of individual audits. Some audits are very large when we look at something like the Department of Safety, whereas a contract audit may be somewhat smaller. You're not on, there you go, Sarah. But the reason that how we decide what audit is from people like you. So we have neighborhood organizations, we have community groups contact us. We keep what's called a risk tracker. We want to know what you want us to audit. We also interview executives and officials throughout the city. And then when we do one audit, we may see an issue that makes us want to go and look at a different related issue. So it is a very formulaic process. It's a framework that's prescribed by the U.S. Comptroller. And but getting the information and relating to communities is so important. So if you truly have a concern, contact our office. It doesn't mean we're going to immediately drop everything and do that audit, but it feeds into that risk tracker. And it means that down the road, when we are making those plans, that we can budget time and resources to do that kind of audit. Let's go forward. There are multiple TIFs in Denver, and we have done TIF audits in the past. If there's a specific TIF that you would like us to look at, we would definitely we would definitely want to hear about that, and we could include that into our risk tracker. People want to know how you what kind of people work at our office. We're back one. Okay, whichever slide comes first, Sarah. This one.
This
Okay.
one, yes.
So we have CPAs, we have professional fraud examiners, we have IT auditors, which is very unique in our profession. Most of the time, IT auditors are something that you would contract for. We're lucky enough to have them embedded in our office. One of the other very important things I think everybody needs to understand is that we operate under, by law, we have to operate under generally accepted government audit standards. And that's to make sure that we're independent, that we don't benefit from the work that we're performing, that we don't bring a bias to the work that we're performing, and that we're reporting and being very clear and transparent about the work that we do perform. So let's go forward. Okay, so some of you may have seen recently in the newspapers questions about airport concessions. We just completed that. I highly encourage everyone to look at that audit, read the newspapers about it. It found that concession contracting at the airport could be improved. Sidewalks. The sidewalk program was something that we audited 2 years ago. Sidewalk program had made a plan to a 10-year plan to break the city up into 10 districts, look at those districts and see if the sidewalks in those areas needed to be repaired. And then city services, while working with the community, could make sure that one district a year could be addressed. We found that they were working, and they agreed, they're working very slow in the process. And what they thought would be a 10-year process would probably be more like a 50-year process. I believe Sara has adopted or has posted that report. If you are looking at efficiency of sidewalk repair, budgeting for sidewalk repair, if you want to make some recommendations about that, I would highly encourage everyone to look at that. It really does show that there is a need for sidewalk repair in Denver, but the timetable for that isn't nearly as fast as the city would like. We've looked at COVID relief funding. We've looked at park maintenance. I think some very interesting audits will be coming out soon. This month, we have one on campaign finance. So if you're curious about campaign finance reporting and how the new campaign finance program, where there's city matching dollars works, you'll want to look at that. And then we always get questions about homeless encampments. With regard to homeless encampments, that is going to be one of the longer audits. We have begun that audit. We probably won't have it out to November or December but we're looking at things like the cost of cleaning up encampments, the effect on businesses, the community as a whole, and how our work as a city measures up against other cities who are facing similar situations.
And we do have a hand raise. Would
Sure.
you take a question from
Absolutely.
Joel?
Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, hi there. Just, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sidewalk repair program that the audit was done for, you described it well. It was a program to do 10% of the repairs in the city at the time, but it wasn't a program where the city paid for those repairs. It was a program because the city doesn't have money to do sidewalk repairs. It was a very complicated program by which property by property, the city would go and do the repairs and then charge back each property owner. So the amount of overhead was very high, along with a lot of other complexity. Is that right?
That is correct. There were some short-term loans for things like that. And there are parts of the sidewalk in non-residential areas that are owned by the city.
Yeah. And there's a small but growing budget for repairing sidewalks that the city owns around parks and municipal buildings, et cetera. But I just I didn't want anyone to be left with the impression that the city has funding to repair sidewalks, or the city can just pay for it out of the general fund or something. All of these approaches, whether it's charging back each property owner, which is a very large cost for each property owner, or without the sidewalk repair program, just citing each property owner to do the repairs is very high cost, versus in this audit that you did, recommendation 1.4 calls on Dottie to look at whether it's reasonable. I mean, it raises a serious question about whether it's reasonable for every property owner to have to do their own sidewalks, or whether there should be really a citywide program to pay for it, which is what the advocacy community is asking for.
No, I think you described it spot on, Joel. I think that was one of our findings, and I think an evaluation about how to best use a program to address the sidewalk issue was one of the key findings in it, without a doubt. Is there another question?
Yes, there's a couple more questions.
Sure.
Let me see. Alani, and then I don't know if there's anybody else, but go ahead.
I have a question about tax increment financing. Have you all ever done any audit work on the use of TIFs?
He did say TIFs.
Yeah, the tax increment financing and Denver Urban Renewal Authority. I know you may not have authority over them, but you may look at how they work with the city, and what projects the city council approves and how that comports with the state law, and then also the city processing. And are those, we just have some interesting issues coming up lately. I'm just curious if that's been looked at that's under the purview of your office.
So no state program can be looked at through our office, but we do look at the contracts with a state agency or a state program and how our office works. So I think the way you said that was spot on. And I know Auditor O'Brien looked at some TIF programs in 2017 or 2016, but it has been a few years, without a doubt. And if that's something you're concerned about, or if you have some unique issues, please, you can email auditor@denvergov.org, or you can send anything you'd like directly to me too. It's all of our emails are just our first name and last name. So it's jeffrey.garcia@denvergov.org, and we'd be happy to include that in our risk. And the more information that anytime you're able to provide us, the better we can set that risk and take a look at those kind of audits.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. And if anyone's looking at historically, if you're looking at an issue, always look at the auditor's office. We have dating back to, I believe our archives go back to 2014 or maybe 2013. And then we have all of the audits that were performed by Auditor O'Brien in multiple different formats, but we definitely have a deep archive of information on the city.
Before you leave the TIFs issue, I mean, when it's something that's Denver specific, I mean, I would think, I guess the question is, can you go in and you're wondering, what all can be done and how far you can dive into that. And I just wondered about that.
Yeah, so legally, we're able to really look at anything that belongs to the city or that the city has responsibility for. Tim likes to say that wherever Denver dollar goes, the auditor goes. And we found that to be true for the most part. We always get people pushing back with the concern that we might be looking at something beyond our scope. But really, if we're looking at it, it's probably because there is a connection to Denver, and that connection to Denver allows us to make those kind of inquiries. Christine, do you have a question?
She does.
I do. I was thinking you might want to finish, but as long as you have the list of the audits up, I have several questions on the parks audit.
Yeah.
And by the way, I do appreciate all the work the auditor is doing and do agree with some of the comments in the chat about giving more power to the auditor. So I'm confused about council's vote. But on the parks audit, I read it, I understand and appreciate the emphasis in that audit on administrative costs not being accounted for and a lot of sloppiness on the parks legacy fund, which in case people don't know, because I think a lot of people don't, 2A, when it was voted on in 2018, shortly became the Parks Legacy Fund. So that's what we're referring to now. And you focus on the administrative issue and then the need for a lot more studies and assessments and, you know, looking more carefully. The yearly assessment isn't enough. So I understand those two things, but I have a couple of questions. This one's a little tricky. I know the auditor is very careful in his language, but since it's a performance audit and looks at what's going on in an agency, is there any way that he might come to a conclusion that an agency, it has poor financial management, poor leadership, is not really looking at its responsibilities and really take that on? That's one part. And the second one is, I don't understand, and I've worked on this for a while, and I'm having a lot of trouble understanding why the audit and the 5-year plan simply merged all of the 2A funds with the general funds for parks. And basically under the 5-year plan, it's one pot and is focused on deferred maintenance. And I'm not against that, but I think it should be coming out of the general fund. And I don't know, I do know, I think how that happened. And I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. First, yes, we can definitely, we will never say a statement like leadership is poor or things like that. Our goal is to always make a corrective action so that other than just saying, sorry, something's broken, we want to make a recommendation on how something can be fixed. So we might, when there's a lack of a leadership or guidance, and I'm not saying that's what was occurring in parks in itself, we might say that they need better policies or procedures or training or a way of checking their leadership or their productivity. And then the other thing, when we're talking about financial management, we never do a purely performance audit. We never do a purely financial audit. We do what's called integrated auditing, which is the kind of the standard for government auditing, and that we look at how different aspects might interact with each other. So if you have poor performance, how does that affect your financials? If you're not able to pay for something, is that because the finances aren't being managed correctly to pay for a program? So we do an integrated audit approach without a doubt. Tim would love to answer this question for you because he frequently disagrees with the way that special revenue funds or funds that are directed specifically for one type of work are used in the city. As a whole, we believe that when a vote comes out and there is a very specific reason for money or an account to be earmarked for something, that a special revenue fund is typically the correct way to use that. The city doesn't always agree and frequently will put funds or merge funds. It is a complicated issue. It's a fund or government fund accounting issue. And it is something that I think Tim would be best to answer the question for you. And I didn't work specifically on the audit, so I can't tell you. I would have to look at the audit to give you a full answer to that. But if you'd like to drop me an email, I can give you a very detailed answer.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we should have him back at some point.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your acknowledging that it is an issue. sort of a, I don't know, almost a convenience issue. We need more money in parks, so let's just grab that. We need more money on climate, so let's grab the climate fund. And the focus gets lost as that moves through. So,
And it's not just a parks issue. I think you were spot on by saying it's an issue with climate, or it's an issue with homelessness. It's an issue with any time that we, and especially when voters vote on something, when residents say, I want this money that we're all willing to commit to spent on a specific issue, making sure that's actually spent on that issue is important. And it's an accounting, not an audit issue, but an accounting and finance, the Department of Finance, how those funds are best set up.
thank you very much for
You're
addressing.
welcome.
And then, Jeff, there's a question asking if they need the Cora request to access to an older audit, a historical audit. I will share here a few links afterwards. We have most of the audits available, even in a Dropbox that is accessible to the public. So I will share the link. And if there's an audit that you don't find, please send us an email and we'll find it for you.
Yeah, please recognize that we go back as far as when Auditor O'Brien took office, there were versions of audits that were only maintained in paper, and we scanned those and made them part of our archive. There is a limit on how far we go back, and that has nothing to do with the current office, but just how records were maintained. Again, I think we go back almost 20 years. But if there is something you're looking for older than that, drop us an email, but there's no promise that the city may have maintained it past then. So let's move forward in the presentation.
Sounds good.
Denver labor, that's me. That's what I do every day. That's absolutely what I love. Again, it's very unique to have a Department of Labor underneath an elected auditor. The really great thing about that is that we follow all the independent standards. We follow all the audit standards so that you see some really great and independent and thoughtful work coming from our office. The work of audit services, which is the side I've been talking about a little bit, and Denver labor are kept to the exact same standards. We enforce 5 laws. Davis-Bacon prevailing wage are the minimums that individuals working in Denver construction must be paid. Prevailing wages if it's paid by the city, Davis-Bacon is paid by the federal government. Minimum wage began in 2020. Anyone working within the city and county of Denver must be paid the city minimum wage, regardless of where that individual may live or where the home office of their employer is. Contractor minimum wage is if you work for a contractor who's working directly for the city, you must be paid the contractor minimum wage. And living wage is a slightly older law. It's not used as much because the minimum wage is larger than the living wage. And the minimum wage says whatever the largest applicable wage is must be paid. But a living wage applied to things like daycare, security, parking lot attendants. There was a group of trades that were being underpaid, and the city sought to correct that. Let's move forward. So our goal in Denver labor is to make sure that wage laws don't benefit a single group of people in the city, but the entire city. We want employers to have a great, strong workforce. We want employers to have equity amongst their hiring. We want employees to get the lawful wages that they're owed, and that they feel comfortable seeking protection. And that the city, both the big city, as in the government, gets the goods and services it needs, but also all of us as residents, that we all get the goods and services that we need, that it's an attractive place to live, an attractive place to work, and that Denver continues to be a special place. I'm a Denver native. I love Denver. I've been here the majority of my life. And I believe that it's something that is built by its businesses and its workers, and I'm glad that we're able to protect that. COVID affected everybody. COVID definitely affected employers and employees. We were ridiculously flexible with trying to make sure that employers who were cash strapped were able to pay their employees. Things like payment plans, things like putting off paying an underpayment if they kept people employed, getting employers resources from the state and the federal government. We wanted to make sure that businesses stayed open during COVID. We know businesses closed, but we tried our best to make sure that it wasn't because of our enforcement that those businesses did close. Let's move forward. So in 2020, as I mentioned, Denver adopted its own minimum wage. In 2019, the state said municipalities like Denver could have their own municipal wage. Denver is the first and only municipality in the state to adopt one. My understanding is Eagle and Summit County are working on that right now because of the cost of working at some of the ski resorts and living in that area. But in 2022, $15.87 is the price that anyone working in the city and county of Denver must be paid. There are a few exceptions for volunteers, student organizations, and the biggest being for food and beverage workers. So if you work in the food and beverage industry and you receive tips, and those tips are documented, you can have your minimum wage reduced by up to $3.02. Let's move forward. Prevailing wage is the oldest wage and hourly law in the state of Colorado. It was conceived in 1950, and Denver and the auditor's office has been enforcing it. We went from enforcing it and reviewing, and so before Auditor O'Brien came, we were looking at every fourth payroll or invoice. Today, we're making sure Denver dollars are spent correctly, and that 100% of payrolls and invoices are reviewed and audited. If you yourself or anyone has worked for a contractor working for the city and county of Denver, we may have money for you. If you go to denverauditor.org and look at the Are You Owed Money link, you will see links to checks that we're holding. There's a statutory period of time that we must hold them before we can remit them to the state for the state to try to place. We actively try to find every worker we have a check for, but sometimes workers move or change employers and we can't find them. We're currently holding about 2,000 checks for about $200,000. Again, if you know anyone who's worked for a contractor working for the city, I highly encourage you to have them look at that site. So I give lots of these presentations. I've said I've probably given a portion of this presentation over 100 times. This is my absolute favorite slide. Auditor O'Brien and I came in 2015. These are the wages that we've been able to recover. So if you're a person receiving these wages, that's great. But if you're a taxpayer like you or I, these are tax dollars that were meant to go to a very specific place. It was meant to pay for labor that was being performed by the city. And for whatever reason, accidental or willful, it was not paid to that correct place. And our office was able to get that money back and make it go to where it was supposed to go. And that's to people performing labor for the city. I like this chart, but it's a little bit old. If you look at that 2022 number, you'll see that that's from the end of March. And in fact, we've been able to recover $1.2 million in 2022, and it's only less than halfway through the year. So it tells me a couple of things. One, that we're working really hard to make sure that employers are compliant and employees are protected, but also that there is a problem and that we need to be very connected with the community to address that problem. Thank you for the thumbs up. Let's move forward. Before anything, I want that last chart, that chart that we looked at before, to be zero. I want everyone to be paid correctly the first time. But to do that, we need to make sure that everyone understands their responsibility. So people like Sara, people like Taylor in our office, their whole job is to make sure employers and employees know what their responsibilities are. And we've seen that most of the time, it is just simply an oversight or a mistake. It's very rare that we see true willful wage theft, but we try to make it as easy as possible. There's a bunch of tools on our website. There's payment calculations, wage determinations, maps of the city. We try to make it as easy as possible for you to understand if you're working in the city and how to be responsible to your employers. If you're an employee, or to your employees, if you're an employee and you feel you're being underpaid, how to best contact us or how to resolve an issue. Some of us are visual learners. Some of us prefer to hear things. Some prefer to read things. We want to make that available to everybody. So if you want to watch us talk about it, you can watch myself or one of my staff discuss wage issues every Wednesday. We do a weekly program called Wage Wednesdays. You can also see us speak about it on Channel 8. We have an Ask the Auditor on Channel 8. There's a lot of Q&As that we get on Facebook, and we're on, of course, all of the social media. Let's move forward. So Auditor O'Brien's done a lot of things, and I like to talk about some of these things because it's unique. You have a very unique watchdog, for lack of a better word, in Denver that really doesn't exist by charter and by statute in other places. One of the really important things I think that our office has done is we did revise that prevailing wage. That wage ordinance hadn't been looked at in an in-depth way since the 50s, and we did some really good work on that. City Council supported us in a meaningful way on that. When we come across an issue that we feel is a risk to the city and we don't have the in-house expertise, we will tap into local CPA and auditing firms. We won't avoid an issue because we don't have the expertise. We'll just hire out for it. And Denver has a wonderful breadth of smart and talented people that we're able to tap into. And we're very proud of that. One of the really great things that we've been able to do is when we've been, it's important that the people who work for us are experts at Denver. And the best way to get experts at Denver are get people who studied here or live here. And we've been able to reach out to the Aurora campus, places like Metro, UCD, and get some of their interns to come in. Interns will come into our office, find that it's a great place to work. And we've been able to retain a great deal of Colorado and Denver residents as part of our staff. Let's go forward. You have an amazing watchdog here. You have an amazing audit organization here. The Knighton Award is an award given to government audit organizations that are the best in the United States. Our office has won it 5 times since 2015, which is almost double of all other auditors in the history of Denver. Also, Auditor O'Brien this year was asked to, and appointed by the comptroller. I like the comment first. Auditor O'Brien was asked by the U.S. Comptroller General's to join his advisory committee so that the work that we're doing in Denver will be used by government audit organizations all across the United States, which is amazing. When the nation realizes and the federal government realizes that the type of work that we're doing is the type of work that they want to see across the United States, it makes me feel good as a Denver resident, but also as a member of the office. Let's go forward a little bit more. So when Auditor O'Brien ran in 2015, the biggest question he got was, well, how will I know if you're doing a good job? How will I know what you're supposed to be doing in the first place? So Auditor O'Brien has went out and spoke to 400 neighborhood associations. I've been about half of them with them. We have a newsletter. We have social media, the Ask the Auditor. We will come to any organization that asks us, even if they don't like us. Sometimes we have some organizations that really don't like the work that we're doing or an audit we did on a subject, and we will sit there and we'll talk to them about the issue. And if you ever, I noticed that your organization has some committee meetings too, some committees that work on things. If you ever would like us to come to one of those committees, please, we're happy to be a part of that too. We have published annual reports that lets us everybody know what we did the last year, and we want people to know what we're going to do in the future. So we have that plan as well. Let's go forward a little bit more. So we are here for you. We work for, we don't work for the mayor's office. We don't work for city council. We work for you. So if you have questions, email us, call us. We respond to all emails and phone calls. You can send us things on Facebook if that's something that you feel comfortable with. Follow us on all the social media. You'll get lots of press about us and news from us on Nextdoor. We feel that that's a really good resource to contact the community. I'm here for you. My biggest work is in the field of labor. So if you have a labor question or you have concern about an employer, contact me. Again, jeffrey.garcia@denvergov.org. I'm happy to address that. Or if you just have a question about the office, contact me and I'll make sure the right person answers the question for you. So it's been an absolute pleasure. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any of those for you.
I think we've had a lot of questions answered, but let's see. And we do have another speaker, but does anybody have any questions right now? There was a clap by Adrian.
Thank you,
I don't
Adrian.
see any other questions. Anybody else want to chime in? I don't see anything. Everybody has contact information, and I appreciate that you'll respond. I've had some other issues with other agencies in the city not responding, so we'll check you out and see if you do respond. So
if you have a hard time with another agency not getting information to you, let me know and we can see if we don't have access to information. We're happy to get you anything that we have access to.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's community planning and development issues. I don't know if you want to get involved in that.
Loretta, go ahead and drop me an email. We can see what we can do.
Oh, awesome. I love that.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for this presentation. And I think we might have you back for some other issues. So I think that's good to hear. And thanks everybody for the questions and the comments. And so thank you so much. You could stay on if you want, and might be an interesting topic to listen to. So I want to go to our next topic, and we have Councilwoman Debbie Ortega. Debbie, I know you're there. There she is. Hi. Hi. Do you need to share the screen?
I do.
Okay, Maggie, can we make her a co-host?
So let me see. Let me pull up my, can you see my screen?
You should be able to. Go ahead. I can't see it yet, so go ahead and see if you can share your screen.
I think I need to go into the Zoom platform to share my screen, right?
Well, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a share screen, and you should be able to pull yours up now.
All right, hold on. I'm in the wrong program, so give me a second.
And make sure it's up on your desktop, whatever you're pulling up. So
yeah, I've got it open right now.
Good.
Can you guys see that now?
Not yet.
How about now?
No. If you go down to the shared screen at the bottom.
Yeah, I did that.
And you hit share my screen.
Yeah,
I think it is. There. Yep, that's me. Oh, I think we're seeing it.
Okay, it says
now we're into Zoom.
Near rail. Can you see that?
No, not yet.
Okay. Let me see.
What we see is the Zoom.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's Emmett. That's your screen, Emmett. Why are we seeing your
Yeah,
screen?
that's Emmett's screen.
Emmett, why are we seeing your screen? Yeah, okay, there we go. We're back.
So you're still not seeing it. I've got the document opened.
Well, you have to, when you go into share my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the bottom where it says share screen, you hit the share screen.
Right, I did that. Let's see.
And I'll share something just to show you. And there's an audit report. That's what I'm sharing right now, but you don't want to see my screen. So you hit share my screen, and then it'll show you all your screens on your desktop, which I have way too many open. And then you click on the actual one you want to share with us.
Okay, so I've got 3 categories. Open participant can share at a time, multiple.
No,
spaces.
so not the little side arrow, the main big arrow, share my screen. Share screen.
Okay, why is it not opening this document? I thought I had it put into my.
No, it's not that it's not up. You probably have it up. It's just we're not sharing the screen.
Councilwoman.
So if you just hit the button that says share screen.
I did that.
Can you send it to Loretta or Maggie and they
Yeah.
can share it for you,
I can do that,
Councilwoman?
if that is the easiest.
Yeah, you can do that. Here, I'll send you my email. It'll go just to you.
Sorry, guys. I'm not as astute. I have my staff that does this part.
Oh no, that's okay. I do this every day, so I'm probably doing it more often than you maybe.
Okay, so here we go.
And while we're waiting on that,
And I can start just jumping into
yeah,
it. For
why don't you go ahead and
let me.
I'll wait for that email.
Okay, so I'm looking for your email.
I just put my email in the chat.
Let me go back to the chat. Sorry. Oh.
You're okay. I think what I understand is we're talking about near railroad.
It's the work that I've been doing that's about trying to ensure that we're addressing safety of people who will be living and working in all the new developments that are being built adjacent to freight rail that carries hazardous material and flammable liquids that poses a huge threat to the people in those buildings. So give me a second, Loretta.
Well, we appreciate that. I think that came up, something similar came up at the transportation meeting on Thursday about, I mean, you know, there are issues at times, and I know there are actually crossings where, you know, they're at grade crossings where people or vehicles cross, and there's accidents at times.
Yeah.
So that's another issue maybe, but.
So I'm just sending this to you now.
Okay, thank you.
So hopefully that comes through, but I'm gonna just jump right into it. So I'm
You
not
do
gonna
that.
spend that much time on the actual PowerPoint because it just highlights some of the information that we presented to my colleagues so that we could push to get money in the budget for this year so that we could hire a consultant, an engineering firm that would assist us in looking at the rail corridors that carry freight rail. Did that not come through?
No, it looks like I have to have a password.
Oh, darn it.
Like, whoops.
Oh my goodness.
Don't think I'm gonna, let me see if I can open it this way. Hold on.
Let me-
No, it says I need your password. And I'm like, I
Let
don't
me-
think you want to
I'll
give that
share
to
it a
me. So,
different way. Let me share it a different way.
yeah.
So, where did that? Sorry. You know, when your vision starts to go, it just makes life harder. It's Advent mediation.
Mm-hmm.
There you are. What? It's trying to tell me it's not going to let me share it with anybody who is
Oh,
part
well,
of the
I mean,
thing. But let me just I'll talk through this stuff, and then what I will do is forward you the PowerPoint so that
okay.
I'll do it in a PDF. That way you can share it with the members of INC.
Okay, that'd be great.
But here's the bottom line, and I'll walk through some of the talking points that are in the document because I've got it open on my other laptop. So we started this work in 2014. It's taken that long to be able to get our city agencies to realize this is a serious issue. And as you have seen, we have built more and more and more new high-rise developments right next to rail. Much of our RTD lines run parallel to these freight lines. And so not only is it people living and working in the buildings adjacent to rail, but it's the impact that it potentially could have to anybody traveling, you know, on a train, a passenger train. So fast forward 2019, the mayor didn't want to put money in the budget that I was asking for our fire department and our Office of Emergency Management to look at these issues, but he created a task force. We called it a work group, and it involved everybody that had anything to do with the railroads to assist us in trying to figure out what do we do with existing developments that happen to be, you know, there already around, you know, issues like evacuation plans and emergency preparedness for the people that live in those buildings, so that when something happens next to them on the rail lines, they know what to do. They're not waiting for the emergency responders to come and help them because they're going to be at the epicenter of where the incident is. So OEM plays a big role in that. And then the other piece that we looked at was how do we deal with new developments coming in. So at the end of a 6-month process, we had a report that we shared with the planning department and others. We even had the Federal Railroad Administrator and both railroads that were part of this whole process. So, you know, they all knew that we were working to try to solve this issue. So the recommendation on how we deal with new developments basically called for a new checkbox that would be on the application form for anybody coming into the planning department, which is the first point of entry for someone wanting to do a development. That would be looking at design review, development review, an LDR, a rezoning, so that when they check that box, the planning staff would give them the report that talked about, you know, all the things that we went through. And in that report included some information that a couple of jurisdictions in Canada had spent time and put together. And ironically, during this process of this work group, we did research through the National League of Cities. The Fire Chief Cade was the chair of this committee. He reached out to the fire chiefs to see if any of their cities, the Chiefs Association, if any of their cities had standards. And then we checked in with the railroads. And there are no standards we could find anywhere in the United States. The only place where there were standards for how you deal with new development next to freight rail that has these hazardous materials was in Canada. So the report provides a link to those two Canadian approaches in terms of how they worked on this issue. Excuse me. So fast forward, a couple of years go by, we go back, ask the planning department, okay, how many projects or developers coming in, check the box that they are within 200 feet of freight rail. The report we got back, there were 27. So we said, okay, so show us the data. We want to know what kind of feedback the agencies provided and what work did the developer do to address this issue. Guess what we got back?
Nothing.
And then in doing follow-up later with the planning director, we were told, we don't have the authority to do this work. It's like, well, why did you wait till now to tell me this? So it's my understanding they're not using the checkbox now, but we have a draft ordinance that will give authority to the agencies to do this work. And that will move concurrently while this work is moving forward. The engineering firm that was hired is HNTB, who has done all different types of transportation work around the world. And they are doing the risk analysis of these rail corridors. And we'll come back with some guidance and recommendations that will be folded into rules that will be adopted by the agencies. We're kind of going back and forth with the administration on what the language in the ordinance should say. And I know that most of my colleagues have followed this issue. They know it's something that we have to address. They pushed hard also that, you know, we can't keep punting this issue down the road. It's something we have to address because we have a number of very, very large developments that are anticipated to come online at some point in the future that are adjacent to rail, and we have to address this life safety issue. The other critically important issue is that I've served on our local emergency planning committee, and I've been through trainings through the National Association of Latino elected and appointed officials with the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And they mandate local governments to identify our risks and our vulnerabilities and put steps in place to address them. And our annual report that we submit, our hazard mitigation plan that Denver submits to the Office of Homeland Security, basically has identified this as one of our vulnerabilities. But you know, to know that we started in 2014 and here we are in 2022, we have not done anything to move the needle in addressing this issue until now that we finally have this engineering report that will give us very clear guidance that will provide the agencies the tools they need to ask developers to mandate, not ask them, because the challenge with the previous approach was there was a point person in the mayor's office who kind of co-chaired this process with Chief Tade, who only wanted the process to be voluntary. You know what happens when you make something voluntary? People don't have to do it, they're not going to. And that's exactly what happened. So this will mandate, and the authority given the agencies to address the rulemaking and address mitigating the risk will then ensure that the life safety of people who live and work in those buildings is going to be addressed as part of that development. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm very anxious. It took a little while for the contract to finally get executed. The contractor was given just this week notice to proceed to begin the work. And we're going to have a kickoff meeting with them, with Dottie and CPD, who have been the primary agencies, somebody from the mayor's office as well, to, you know, look at what some of those things are. They have a copy of the report. We've provided them all the information on the people that Jack from my office talked directly with from the two communities in Canada where we have you know, direct information on, you know, all the procedural steps that local government went through to ensure that they were addressing these very kind of issues as well. So Loretta, I will forward you the PowerPoint so you have that and you can share it with the members of INC. And then I'll just stop now and see what kind of questions that anybody may have on this issue.
I think, thank you, Debbie. I think Ian has a question.
Go ahead, Ian.
Thank you, Loretta. Thank you, Councilwoman Ortega. I have been following along with you on this for a long time. You know, I can remember, I think you came on the radio in like 2016 about it, and there was a report that goes all the way back to there. It's actually that earlier conversations brought my work with Green Latinos to trying to understand the midstream and the trains, the intermodal interchange in North Denver. I just want to say I really appreciate it. And any way I can be supportive of this long effort you've put in as we've increased density during that time, I'm very much in support of, and I just want to say that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I just want to be clear, our rail corridors where we have these freight lines run along Santa Fe and I-25, they run along I-70, they run right through the heart of our city. And, you know, what really prompted me to start working on this issue was driving over Spear Boulevard and 4 days in a row, seeing these tanker cars that stretched from the parking lots of Coors Field all the way to the parking lot of the Pepsi Center and sat right in the heart of downtown. And I don't have to tell you guys about so many of the incidents we've seen occurring, you know, around, not just throughout the US, but around the globe, where people who want to do something crazy, you know, could potentially try to do something here. And God forbid, you know, that we would ever have to deal with a real situation. But the reality is it poses a serious vulnerable situation for the city of Denver. And if anything were to happen in the downtown Central Platte Valley area where those trains often stage, you know, not only do you have the adjacent light rail line and the hub where all the trains come in, but we have filled in the Central Platte Valley with housing and commercial buildings. And, you know, some of the early buildings are right smack next to the tracks. And those folks in Central Platte Valley reached out to us and said, we need help with an evacuation plan. We want to make sure that, you know, we know what to do. And in their mind, they said, it's not a matter of if something happens. For us, it's a matter of when something happens. we want to know that we can get out of our community because they have 2 access points, 15th and 20th. And if those are all blocked off, they got to be able to get out of their community. So that's an example of why this is important for us to be doing this work and not wait for something to happen.
All right, and I really appreciate this, and I think, you know, with the potential for e-liches and that all development, that's going to be a big impact too. That's a major impact, and I mean, and I know regulations regarding chemicals and, you know, I mean, clearly we know coal, we know other things go through, other flammable things that go through. But those are issues that could impact and cause a fire. I mean, we have severe drought.
Well, and let
Clearly,
me remind you, it wasn't that long ago, we had a train that dangled over the over the South Platte River that, you know, thank goodness it didn't have any nasty chemicals. I think it was a train car carrying lumber, but you know, they carry lots of different materials, and that could have posed a huge threat to our, you know, our water source. So
right.
You have some other questions? Happy to
I
answer.
do. Drew, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, Debbie. It's good to see you, and thank you for bringing up this issue. I just wanted to point out, thanks for bringing up this issue, Debbie. This is a situation we deal with every day in Elyria, Swansea.
Right.
We have oil tankers, we have coal trains, and just so I think you appreciate the magnitude of this problem. And this is an antiquated system. It's my understanding these trains that we see all over Denver, you know, a mile long, full of coal, they just move in and move out. And it's a transit alignment, I guess, that's just very antiquated from probably 150 years ago. And this also impacted the discussion of Interstate 70. The whole reason the highway had to go over or under was because of Union Pacific. And there was some discussion way back about how do we just get the trains out of Denver? And this was about, I think, 2010, maybe 12 years ago. I remember hearing the cost of taking the trains out of Denver was, I heard the figure $30 billion. And this was like 12 years ago. So I guess I'm sort of rambling about this, but the trains ought to go. I mean, they're an antiquated system. They ought to just get out of here. But who's going to pay for that? And the other thing I think, Debbie, you know, is this is way above the city level or even the state level. I think it's the PUC. Is it at the Public Utilities Commission at the federal level that controls the rights to railroads? And these are rights that go back 150 years. You can't touch the railroads. So we've got to live with them.
So
and I appreciate what you're doing, Debbie,
table.
but I don't know what I'd be short of getting rid of the trade. I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, but it's a really intractable problem.
It is. And, you know, we had the railroads at the table as well as the Federal Railroad Administrator. And that is the issue. I mean, they'd be happy to move. They don't like being that close to everything, but they're not going to pay to move. So unless there are dollars somewhere else that someone can come up with to do a realignment out to the north as was planned, that's the plan you're referring to. And this is a major freight corridor to move things across the country. When they come through downtown Denver, we're known as a high urban traffic area. So they slow down their speed. So I don't believe we would see, you know, high speed derailment like what you see in other areas that have occurred, because they really do have to slow down that speed. But just the fact that some of those products are here, I can remember when Elyria, Swansea, and Globeville had to be evacuated on different occasions because of acid spills or other nasty chemicals that posed a threat to the residents. One was actually on a Sunday morning where the 3 churches down in lower downtown, lower Highlands all had to be evacuated on an Easter Sunday. And they were very upset because that was a big collection day for them. But
Yeah. Debbie, I want to just add one other thing, is just the pollution from the diesel trains. If you've ever been by them, you know, that's another, we have an air pollution problem in the city. And I don't know. I mean, it's part of the problem. I don't know how you address it.
That is something that EPA follows up on. Actually, we had somebody from EPA that was part of our work group, and they deal with the air emissions from the railroad. So those are something we can absolutely follow up on when you guys are experiencing that any place in the city.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for your input, Drew.
Adrian, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Debbie, thank you so much for doing this work. As you know, I've worked in the hazardous waste business much of my career, including, full disclosure, for a couple of railway companies. This is intractable because we as a community want to transport these materials so we can use them.
Right.
And that inevitably means that one way or another, something is going to transport them into and through our communities.
True.
Against that, you know, unless we want to stop using them, which, you know, in a whole variety of areas, we've shown that we do not want to stop using them. So as Shakespeare said, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. I mean, at the end of the day, we've created this problem for ourselves, and we've refused to allow it to be addressed by other means. Much of the really dangerous stuff is liquid. Yep. And a good way of dealing with that is with pipelines, which we as a community seem to hate. Okay, you know, so that's fine. Railways aren't terrific because of where they are. We've shown a reluctance to move them. It seems to me that if we moved them out to a corridor around Denver, for example, and sold the land they are currently located on, that would probably go damn close to paying for it, and it would give Drew somewhere else to live as well. So, you know, I think that these are incredibly difficult questions, but they are societal questions that are way beyond the ability of Denver to solve. Flip side, we can kickstart it because we are the people in the eye of the gun. And thank you for doing that. I wish I had more positive suggestions to make to you, but the reality is that this is a self-created problem that is not going to go away, like I-70, like the river, like a whole bunch of things. We love to live in cities, we love to eat, we love to drink, and we love to drive our cars, and that creates this problem.
So let me just add one other thing that I think is an important part of this conversation. There is a bill that moved through the legislature that looked at creating funding, and I'm pretty sure the governor will sign the bill that basically looked at the Front Range rail that would go from Fort Collins down to Pueblo. And part of that bill tied in Burnham Yards, which is one of the vacated railroad parcels in West Denver, adjacent to the Lincoln Park neighborhood. And it
Bacon.
Right. And it created funding for that to look at how to plan, because as some of you know that live, you know, adjacent to I-25 in that area, CDOT had been doing what's referred to as a PEL study that was basically from Alameda to 20th Street, trying to figure out how they deal with the congestion through that part of I-25. And it's my understanding Governor Polis has said he doesn't want to see it widened. And part of that PEL study looked at realigning the tracks that are adjacent to the highway. And there may be a way to even suppress the tracks. They did this, I believe, in, I think it was Los Angeles. It was a California city where your train couldn't derail into a community because it's basically set like in a trench. And so I think this affords the state and the city to work together and look at, some other way to deal with that realignment, but the Burnham Yards tie directly into that. The planning will then look at how do you do that alignment, parallel it with the RTD tracks through that site, and then have the remaining of that land that potentially could be available for redevelopment that could complement the Lincoln Park neighborhood and connect to the grid system. So those are all sort of conversations that are in play right now. And I think will be sort of accelerated once the governor signs the bill and they figure out what next steps they're going to move forward to address the reuse of that 70-acre parcel. Any other questions?
I don't know if there are any other questions, but I appreciate this. I mean, we also have that issue of, transporting in large vehicles through other neighborhoods. But I think it's great that we have this, and I think it's great conversation, and I think it's something that we need to discuss. So we're interested to hear more. So
I will
thank
keep
you so much.
I will keep you all posted. When we have the ordinance that moves forward, having community support for that will be really important. So I'll give you a heads up of when that will be coming to committee. I will be doing my due diligence with my colleagues to make sure we've got the votes for it to pass. But in the meantime, once we know that it's moving forward and we have language that we have agreement on, I'll keep you guys posted on that.
Do you mind if we put your PowerPoint on our website?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, great.
And I will absolutely forward that to you.
Okay, great. Alani, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Councilwoman Ortega, and thanks for being here. Do you know if there was any funding in the bipartisan infrastructure bill to help with some of these concerns that have been raised? I mean, there was a lot of talk about environmental justice and mitigating impacts of environmental, legacy of contamination and removing pollutants. Was any of that for rail and any of the issues that might have been brought up just in today's meeting or anything related?
Yeah, Eleni, thank you for bringing up that issue. I did fail to mention that. Sorry, I have bad allergies and it's just been a bad allergy season for me. But there is a lot of money that Biden put in the railroad category, and what they will be looking for are projects that have put some steps in place. So part of what potentially could happen, and this railroad study that we have being done can play a big role in part of that, in terms of identifying. We know that we need to deal with the grade separation at Santa Fe and Calumet, just north of Alameda. This potentially could impact that as well. If we could trench the railroad and still deal with I-25, where you have better shoulders and some of the kinds of things that doesn't widen it, but makes it safer. And at the same time, maybe we can bring in freight rail as part of this bigger picture, then I think, and I don't know whether there would be like a stop at Burnham Yards. We do have RTD stops, but ideally, if you're going to look at freight rail, you want it to interface and connect with what we already have, right? So there is the opportunity to access some of these federal railroad dollars. And it's my understanding that so far across the country, very little of that money has been tapped into. And this positions Denver to deal with some of these challenging issues by going after some of those resources. Now, I know your focus is on some of the environmental side. That absolutely has to be part of any of this moving forward. It requires, the NEPA process to be utilized. And so stay tuned. I'll keep you informed as I learn more about, how that piece is moving forward.
Well, maybe they can tap in and fix the underpass on Alameda too. That bridge is just scarier than anything, and we all know it's one of the worst bridges,
That would be an
underpasses in Denver.
That would be an expectation to address that as part of the grade separation at the same time.
Please.
So, yeah.
Please. It's scary if you're a pedestrian or on a bike under there because the crumbling walls and the flooding still and all those issues. So that's
I drive that often, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's scary. So if nobody's done that here, it's scary, especially if you're a pedestrian or on a bike. It's even worse. So, all right. Well, thank you so much
to share this information with.
Okay. Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure. Take care.
All right. You can hang on if you want. So I missed something in the early on, and I want to go back to it. Judy, I want to come back to you. Sorry about it. I forgot the engagement survey, and I just want to go ahead and have you speak a few minutes about that. So let's talk about that.
Great. I thought we might be running out of time, and happy to just want to give everybody a heads up on this group that we are constructing what we're calling an INC engagement survey. We're really intending to reach both our current and recently past members, but more importantly, those who have been RNOs that have been members but aren't currently, and those who have never been members, to try to understand what's the value of INC, what could be the value of INC, and what are the issues that are important for people to want to hear us address and be part of this conversation. And we want to really try to reach a cross-section of our RNO membership, and we're using the RNO registry at the city RNO registry as the basis of our contact frame. And so sometime, I'm hoping in the next month, you will be getting the person who is listed in the RNO registry will be getting an email and a survey link for that. And we really would appreciate everybody giving us your input. It's really important to know, and it includes, for those of you who are here, how do we want to continue to meet? And it's trying to get people's view on how we're emerging from the pandemic and how we want to continue to go forward and meet the needs of the RNOs, both those who are with us and those who have yet to join us. So that's an update. Yes, Gertie.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any way that you could also access past delegates as opposed to going through solely the city registry of current RNOs, because I think there may be people who are no longer delegates who may have some input into that would help you answer some of the questions you've raised. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion. I'll ask Trupti and others about other ways of thinking about that and working with that idea. I also want to give a big shout out to Trupti, who's been working on this and is helping form this list of the sampling list, if you will, and to Bill Tanner, who's been helping with both the questionnaire construction and getting it into SurveyMonkey. And so it's definitely a team effort. And so that's a great suggestion to think about, making sure we're getting all those points of view. Gertie, will do. All right.
Great. And anybody else who has any comments, or has any suggestions, Christine?
I'm just, after listening to this excellent discussion, as always, thank you. I am, and thank you very much, Judy, for doing this, but I am wondering if maybe we need a topic that addresses why city taxes are not able, if the population's rising and business levels rising and everything is moving very, very fast, why aren't taxes, our major source of revenue, able to keep up with housing, sidewalks, parks, everything? I'm just asking, I really don't understand why we just keep creating another stream of revenue, another 0.25 here, another 0.25 there, another enterprise fund. I don't understand it. And I'm wondering if it might be a topic for a meeting, and I don't know what other people think.
And the question is, Christine, who would you want to present on that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe God.
God.
Yeah.
The ominous one.
It just feels like we're using, we're raising money all the time and falling further and further behind.
Loretta, I'll just sort of go because I had my hand up. I second Christine's question. I think we keep creating revenue streams that are additional burdens on residents. And there's a lot of money flowing into this city with development. I mean, I don't understand. There's a lot. Some people are paying very high rents, and there's a demand for it. They're coming from San Francisco where they think Denver's cheap. Yeah, but some of us who have lived here like all of our lives are really struggling, and we keep adding to the burden, the financial burden of living in this city. So I echo Christine's question. Where is all the money going? Just somebody to go through the city budget. Why is it that we keep needing to create new revenue streams for composting, to do what other cities are doing, now for sidewalks, all of these things, just adding to the burden, which means displacing people because taxes are going up. Where are all our taxes going? I know that's a question. Anyway, thank you, Christine, for raising this.
Isn't that the job of the auditor?
Right. I think we had someone in the room today we could have been asking those questions to, and we can certainly bring the auditor himself back. He had confirmed for today, and then he said, well, no, I can't make it. So we kept them on the agenda because they had already been planned, but we can bring them back because I think they're part of it too. And part of the reason was, where is this funding going? I mean, part of what you're talking about, Drew, is, there are real estate developers that are making a lot of money. That has nothing to do with, the city money, because they're making the money.
Right.
And,
no, I know.
And I know for community planning and development, I just looked at intermediate projects and got an email that said, commercial projects are approved in 1.7 weeks, whereas our residential is approved in 6.3 weeks. Now, you tell me who gets that priority. It's not us as residents who are trying to, do a small development. It's the commercial that are really, the city's prioritizing them clearly, right? So there's an issue that I have, but Gertie, go ahead.
I guess what I am constantly reminded of, though, is that our property taxes in Denver City are way low compared to a lot of other cities. And I'm not saying, I think it's like we need urban economics 101, because I don't understand where all the money goes, except I think a lot of it's not in a corrupt way, but going into, as has been suggested, developers' pockets.
Loretta, I agree, Gertie, that our taxes are low coming from New York City, but then just raise the taxes on business, on commercial, on the air travel, and on us, but stop with this incremental stuff, I guess I'm saying. We should
Bruce,
just take care of ourselves.
it's the
Yeah.
the Tabor Amendment.
It's Tabor has a lot to do with it. I mean, I lived in Minneapolis. Property taxes here are so cheap. And that's Midwest, right? So Minneapolis, ours were at least 3 times as high, but we didn't really pay taxes on clothing and food. If it's prepared food, there was. We knew that's part of where it was going. So that was part of the deal for the state of Minnesota. But anyway, Pete, do you have a question?
I just wanted to jump in. One thing, it's been several years since I looked at the budget, but I'm almost positive the lion's share of the budget goes to personnel costs. Things like the police force, the fire department, city services, and
Infrastructure.
things like that. But one thing that always strikes me is this is where I kind of say everything's connected, but we have to keep increasing salaries for personnel inside the city, being as the city keeps becoming more unaffordable to live in. And I would say, in my view, that deals a lot with how we're not building any housing in the city, which is supply and demand is the driver of most housing costs. And so I think, I imagine if you talk to the auditor or whoever, they'll probably say, things like our police budget, fire budget, things like that are huge costs, and we have to negotiate those up every year due to cost of living increases.
This is Drew. I'll just jump in on Pete's point. It's my understanding that the city now is using many more contractors in place of city employees as we used to do. So it's not, I mean, there is like police and fire and those things, but a lot of what were city employees are now contractors who also seem to be making bids with the city, and let's face it, they also donate to politicians' campaigns. So I just want a better handle. I like Christine's question. Where does the money come from? Where's the money going?
And thanks, Drew, because I think that the auditor did speak to that. He said they would consult with outside, and they would hire outside consultants to do some of the work. And you heard them say that today. Yeah. I mean, they clearly said that. So I'm going to ask for this because I think that, you brought this up. So, Alani, you did say in the chat that you had somebody who is a fiscal, and I don't want to misquote you, but, somebody who might be a financial expert, on municipalities. That would be awesome to have somebody talk about it. And, and clearly the auditor is saying he's open and, you don't need a DORA request to get this information, that we should be able to get a lot of information from the auditor's office. I'm just wondering if we could get like a committee together that would like to work on this as a presentation for maybe July. And you could do it via Zoom, but I don't know if I hear people speaking up. Does anybody, Pete, Alani, Drew, Christine, anybody interested in this?
Well, I could sort of draft what I asked, because it goes a little beyond what Drew was saying, although that's the starter. But I'm working on the Heat Island presentation with Parks and Sustainability for July, so I can't work on.
Oh, that's right, July. So we don't have a topic for June. It would be June. Wait, we do have a topic for June. It's August. Sorry. I'm thinking I'm putting it all in my compartmentalized. So it would be August. So it's a little bit farther out there, but I don't know if anybody be interested in working on this topic.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look into it. And I have worked with people who are experts in sort of that kind of how taxes are raised, how revenue is created, where does it go, and what are the ramifications of those funding sources, and what flexibility does it give you or doesn't give you, and how, because that is really it. It's like, as Christina said, follow the money, but sometimes there's so many complicated vehicles that we use money can be directed in other ways. So how do we use the tools in our toolkit? Is it sales tax? The city has various sources. If you've read the budget book, which I have, and I've actually analyzed it, the city's budget has gone up in FTEs in every agency. It's just not police and fire. And every agency has gone up a great deal in the course of 5 or 6, 7 years. It seems incremental if you just look at 1 year, but start looking at it over the trend of, let's say, its low point would have been maybe 2010. They shed a lot of jobs because of the recession. And you know how recession sometimes takes a year or two in to realize, and then it just arced way back up. So we went into an unprecedented, you know, different posture since that time. So that's what you'd want to have. And I know a couple of people that analyze that kind of stuff and maybe can explain, here are all the financial tools that the city uses, and here's how your money is directed.
And just one last thing. I think the other thing is, you know, you mentioned it earlier, TIFs. And I think tax increment financing, you know, plays a big part. It's like these corporations are getting, you know, discounts, whereas, you know, then the funding, why are they still getting that, and where is that going, and those sorts of things. So I would love to see that tied in, but that's kind of my thing. So if we have a committee, I have one more presenter for today. Alani, Christine, anybody else want to work on that? Emmett, you want to be a part of that? That'd be great. All righty. So I'll kind of task you with that. If you want my help, let me know. But I really appreciate that, because I think it's going to be an interesting, really interesting topic. We could see if the auditor could come back at that time also. So I think that's worthwhile. So that would be for August. We have from Congresswoman Degette's office, we have Joe Wood. I think he might be at the rally, and I think you're back. Are you there, Joe? He is.
Yes.
Okay, there you are. There. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for making the time. I did just come from the rally for Roe v. Wade with Congresswoman Degette. She gave an awesome starting speech. So thanks for your patience while we were doing that. I worked in Councilwoman Ortega's office for about 5 years prior to starting in Congresswoman Degette's office at the beginning of this year. So met a lot of you in that capacity, but wanted to say hello in this new role, and answer any quick questions you all have. I know we're at the end, so don't want to drag on into time, and also just let you know that our office is here for pretty much any interface issues you have with federal agencies, federal government. We have, people that work specifically with EPA, IRS, Small Business Association, administration, and all that kind of stuff. And we also have these new exciting opportunities called earmarked. Well, they're called community project funding requests, but they used to be known as earmarks. They came back last year, and Congresswoman Degette was able to get several millions of dollars for different affordable housing and homelessness programs through that who applied. This year we had 77 applications, I believe, of different orgs. So it's really taken off. And when that funding opportunity rolls around next year, definitely we'll try to be in touch about that. And so, yeah, is there any questions or anything, or issues you'd like me to share with the Congresswoman?
Well, I have some personal, but I'll get to you. So anything else? Anybody have anything else? Thanks, Joe, for coming. I don't see anything else. Do we want to adjourn for today, or is there any new business anyone wants to bring up? I don't see anything. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting today. All right. Thanks to everybody for coming. If you want to work with Christine, Emmett, I think you both have each other's phone numbers. Alani, do you have? I think you might have everybody's email. If not, let us know.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot on the heat island. I don't know, but
okay. Well, I think if you guys can just start a little bit, or maybe follow up, and just kind of delegate, right? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today. All right, everyone, take care.
Bye.
Thank you.